then this leads us to it. Is it more or less likely to repeat in an expanded playoff era? What tripped up a lot of these teams is that they just lost their game or two during the regular season. They were still good, and then they finished 5th, or they finished 7th, or they finished 11th, and that was it. In the BCS era or the 14 playoff era, you were out. You didn't have a chance. But now you'd be in. So 21 of 27 would have made the expanded playoff. So now, as we balance this, okay, that's a pretty good chance of getting in. But then also for those teams that did get in the past, you just had to win one game, maybe two in the 14 playoff era. Now you have to win 4. So do you think repeating will become more likely or less likely in the expanded playoff era?
I think it'll become more likely, which, might sound crazy because you just said you have to win more games once you get to the postseason. But I think that we are now allowing for the potential for some kind of step back from a championship season that still ends with you having an opportunity to repeat as a champion. Like you go from whatever, an 11-1 and 12-0 team to a team that's 10-2, you're probably still going to get in. And then I think there's something to whatever you want to call it, the institutional knowledge of having gone through the playoff gauntlet once before and winning it all that would help you once you got there again. So I don't think it's going to jump up to like, we had 3 out of 27 to suddenly we're going to have 20 out of 27. But I think, I do think it's more likely to happen now with increased access to the playoff and teams figuring out the blueprint to navigate the playoff once they get there.
So we'll talk about this a little more specifically as it applies to Ohio State in the third segment. But for instance, as we get more and more like the NFL with college football, you think about the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Kansas City Chiefs have institutional knowledge. They have a quarterback who has been through it all. They have an experienced head coach. They just have that structure of a winning team. And so if they go 11-6 instead of 14-3, they're still going to get in. And then once they get in, maybe they have one fewer home game, but they're still the Chiefs. And they have all the things and all the experiences, plus the talent that if only 2 teams made, if you just said the best team in the AFC gets in versus the best team in the NFC, it's like, the Chiefs went 11-6, they didn't make it. I think we're going to start thinking about college football more like that. And again, I don't know that this is the show to debate whether that's good or bad. It just is. But I think the idea of we're going to have 10-2 teams that are good, that played a tough schedule, that had a goofy week, that had a couple bad injuries, but as long as they get in the playoff and they're the 7 seed or the 9 seed or the 6 seed or whatever, you think to yourself, oh, they're dangerous. That coach has been there before. They have enough veteran players on their roster. They've been through it. And that's going to be a different way of thinking about the sport than, well, I guess if we don't have a perfect regular season, we might have ruined our chances to win this thing again. The institutional knowledge of winning. And listen, it's like, that's going to be more important than ever. Oh, you mean more important than when Nick Saban won 7 titles, 6 at Alabama because he knew how to do this thing? But sort of, yes. Sort of even more important, because I do think having been through it, we're just going to enter a new era where 7 seeds, man, if they're blue blood 7 seeds that have been through it, watch out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I guess the one thing I would say to maybe play devil's advocate for myself is like, one, I don't think you can make the NFL comparison like 1-to-1 because like the Chiefs, for example, have a magic quarterback for 15 years, right? And you're not going to have that dynamic doesn't exist in college football. And I guess like if you were to say on one hand that like increased access to the playoff and then institutional knowledge can help teams maybe repeat more often than they had previously, I think that's true. But then the impediment to it is the way the rosters are built in college football generally. Like all these teams that were trying to repeat prior to 2018, I guess, weren't living in fear of half their roster leaving every offseason. Short of guys going off to the NFL, right? Like
But when we're
transient nature
having,
of college football, I do think would be the pushback on
but we're
the
having a
access.
repeat. We're having a repeat conversation. How many
Yeah.
defending national champs are losing a bunch of guys off their roster that matter?
I don't know. I don't know that
I
we have enough
think,
data to support to
but
go
I
one way or the
think
other.
if we're talking about defending.
Mhm.
I think the portal helps defense because you, as the
Yeah, it
champ,
could.
are more likely to attract guys and patch holes immediately than lose guys that matters in the portal. So again, we're going to talk specifically about Ohio State, but Ohio State lost 2 left tackles, Josh Simmons and Donovan Jackson, and they lost their right tackle, Josh Fryer. And previously, it would have been like, okay, well, let's see what these young tackles. And instead, Ohio State just went the portal and added 2 tackles and patched those holes. And so,
Yeah, but it's not a guarantee that they're like. But there's no. I mean, I think you're right. On the average, you're probably right. It will more often be a positive than it is a negative. But like, I'm not. Whether it's Ohio State or anybody else, there's no guarantee that the portal tackles you got to patch the holes are better than the guys who would have stepped up, right?
But is not the portal a plus? Who's a player that's mattered that has left the defending national champ to go in the portal? Like, are
like
we
I
ever
said,
going to see that?
so thus far, like I don't, I don't know that I could give you one.
But what would be the circumstance of that? I just like, I'll be very, and this is the thing that like, it's sort of like one of those, like, bombs that you would drop into the sport. Let's get to the year where Arch Manning wins the national title at Texas this year and then is coming back, but comes back to USC because USC paid him $10 million. I don't
think that's the scenario. I don't think the star leaving is the scenario. I think the concern would be more being sapped of your depth.
But I would say
through a 16, 17 game season to repeat as a champion.
But it certainly hasn't happened to Ohio State. Ohio State is
no, it hasn't, and we've only lived in the world where that's even a possibility for like 2 or 3 years. So like I'm not.
I just don't think in a repeat because it's just the conversation shifts for this, right? Because this is not just building a good team conversation. This is you're the champ, and I just think the portal for the champ is always going to be a plus because you're going to have guys who want to come patch your holes, and I just like if you're next up. Okay, you lose your depth. Like the coaches complain about that. Okay, Ohio State lost Zen Michalski to go be the starting tackle at Indiana, but Ohio State would much rather have Ethan Onyanwa and Philip Daniels than Zen Michalski. It's portal plus on the offensive line for them, and I just don't know what the circumstance is going to be where a champ gets nailed by the portal, and maybe you lose the guy. Maybe you lose like 2 or 3 years down the line. You lose, hey, our freshmen who are like, oh man. We're so good, I'm never going to get on the field. But in pursuit of a repeat, I think it's portal plus. I think it makes it more likely to repeat this part of this era.
Like I said, on the average, I think you'll be right if we like started to actually track that data.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking like specifically about the 2 teams we saw play in the national championship this past season and how much offensive line depth mattered to them getting there. And how that could be difficult to maintain over the course of an off season.
Well, Notre Dame is an example of this. Brandon saying, I think Doug is mixing Ohio State's good culture for norm of the sport. I just don't think we're going to be in a place in the sport where like dependent upon starters are going to be like bolting championship teams. Now, honestly, what happened at Notre Dame?
I don't think we are either.
What happened at Notre Dame is about as stark as you're going to find. To lose Rocco Spindler, Pat Coogan, and Sam Pendleton in the portal to go start at 3 Power 5 programs on the offensive line, that's an example of what you're talking about. So Notre Dame, right? Jeremiah Smith doesn't catch the last bomb and whatever. Notre Dame could have been the national champs. And I don't think that Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler, and Sam Pendleton would have stayed at Notre Dame if they were the national champs, right? It would have been like, okay, well, the bottom line is they have guys on the offensive line who are going to be healthy, and those guys think they aren't going to start, so they're looking for an opportunity to go start. But I still think there's like a net plus there for Notre Dame in the portal with what you're adding You had Devontae Smith defensively, and you had a couple receivers that you think Malachi Fields from Virginia. Like, I still think you're patching holes, and where you lost those 3 offensive linemen, yes, it's good depth, but you're losing from a place of strength. I still think Notre Dame's net portal plus this offseason, but that's what you're talking about, right? Like, they lost 3 good offensive linemen off a team that was in a game in the fourth quarter to win it all.
Yeah, and like Ohio State lost a bunch of defensive linemen, not via transfer. They only lost like kind of one via transfer that was going to play, but they lost guys at the NFL. Like, they didn't load up, so it's like.
But they were always good. But like, they're always going to lose guys to the NFL, and they did add Bo Atkinson. And 5 years ago, they would not have added a Bo Atkinson.
I'm thinking about defensive tackle specifically.
But I mean, you think about Ohio State and adding Bo Atkinson and Max Clare at tight end and the 2 tackles that we mentioned. And 5 years ago,
can't play defensive tackle. That's what I'm getting at. Like, I think it's a line of scrimmage conversation primarily.
But that always would have been the case. But that's like no different. Like you think, so they lost Hero Canoe, who's going to probably play a little bit at Texas, right? Like, do you think they're worse off?
Because Texas had 8 defensive tackles. No, I don't.
You're always going to lose guys. You're always. I mean, that's the nature of college football.
No, I don't think like Hero Canoe will be the difference between Ohio State repeating and not. But I think a guy like that generally for any team trying to repeat is like kind of what I have in mind. Like a younger player who hasn't played a lot, who you're counting on to step up and play an important role in a team that's trying to repeat as a championship, and he decides to go somewhere else because they offered him more money. And like, if it only happened for Ohio State with kind of one guy, and maybe it won't ever happen for a team specifically like Ohio State for more than one guy, but I think it could happen for other programs and if it happens with 2 or 3 guys in the same position group, then I think you could have enough of an issue that makes repeating slightly more difficult. Not like, derails your entire season kind of thing. But I do think depth on the offensive and defensive lines is pretty crucial to winning a national championship now. And it kind of always has been, but I think it's even more crucial now with the added amount of games we're asking teams to play. And it's at those 2 positions specifically that I would be a little worried about not having enough bodies to make it through year over year.
So I would say, in the end, do you think, I would say ability to patch holes in the portal and the fact that you can stumble during the regular season, but still make the expanded playoff. And then once you're there, you're the champ and you've been through this already. I say more likely to repeat in the expanded playoff era. That's my official, I'll say more likely. Will you say more likely or less likely?
More likely. So I was more likely when you asked me at the beginning. I'm still there. I guess I wanted to put that argument on the table because I don't want to gloss over the fact that roster construction can be tricky and perhaps a pitfall of a team trying to repeat.
I mean, okay. Justin Fry, Ohio State's former offensive line coach, did a great job last year figuring this all out on the fly with the injuries to Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin, and they had a bunch of guys step up and play really well. And if they didn't, Ohio State may not have won the national championship. But the thing with Justin Fry always was, is he recruiting at a high enough level? Is he winning battles for top 100 national recruits on the offensive line? And if this was not the portal era, I think that would be coming home to roost in a real way right now for Ohio State. And instead, they solved 2 tackle issues in the portal. And so that's the kind of thing.
We think.
But much better. I mean, no guarantee, but I think they are 5 times better off than they would be if they had just kept the offensive linemen who were on their roster and you couldn't add transfer guys.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no guarantee, but like, previously, sometimes, because when you have, I do think Ohio State's an interesting example in the big picture here. There's like a team like LSU 2019 is a team we can talk about, right? Their attempt to repeat, they lost 5 games. They lost everybody. And then you have a veteran team of incredibly skilled players and they all leave. And then what happened is, especially when those guys are veterans, you have a bunch of guys behind them who haven't played because the guys ahead of them were so good. And then I think in the past, there were times like you could almost, by definition, step into a reset year because you lost a bunch of 3-year starters. And now you're having like a bunch of guys like, well, we don't have any starters left because those guys couldn't start because they were blocked. And now you just go get somebody else's starters, right?
Yeah.
That previously a team like Ohio State, I think almost would be built, a program like Ohio State, like Georgia, schools like that don't have reset years anymore. But that's what I'm talking about, that to be great, you've got to be talented and often experienced. And then, I mean, you look at what happened to Washington last year, right? Now, if Washington make the national championship game and then everybody leaves, and it's a different deal because you lost the coaching staff too. But if Kalen DeBoer had been there, right, I think you might have been able to go through and like, okay, well, don't you want to come play for us? We do things this way. We'll get some receivers in the portal. We lost our 3 top receivers. You would have kept a couple offensive linemen, but we lost our tackles. We'll add those guys, right? And you wouldn't have had the step back year if you would have had the structure in place of all of that returning. Okay. I think it's an interesting debate as people try to think about the pursuit of this and whether you think it feels realistic or fanciful for a team like Ohio State. Trying to think about how it used to be. Isn't it? It's good. Or are you mad that I'm yelling at you a little bit?
No, I don't. I just like, I think you are correct, and you will be on the right side of history more likely than not, that the portal will be a plus for these teams trying to repeat. But another way to view it is just like there is now a second avenue that players can use to leave your program after you win a national title that didn't exist 5 years ago. And I guess as long as you're good at balancing that out by bringing the right guys in via the portal, then maybe it's a moot conversation. But I don't know that I would assume that everybody would be great at that.